Part 44. In search of a new base. The Prophet's living arrangements in Mecca grew more precarious as time passed. His protector, Mutim ibn Adiyi, was nearing the end of his life, and his own tribe, Banu Hashim, had disowned him. After the people of Ta'if rejected him, and Mecca grew ever more hostile, the Prophet accelerated his efforts of finding a base. He began approaching tribes visiting for Hajj. As previously discussed, the Prophet did this in the past to preach the message of Islam, but now he was seeking to join a new tribe. Such a move was not unprecedented but was very rare, and it was clear that this was the Prophet's last resort. During Hajj season, camps at Mina were allocated according to tribe, and the Prophet would utilize this opportunity to approach the tribe leaders separately. Rabia ibn Abad said,
I remember a young man coming and speaking to my father, telling him to embrace the worship of Allah and leave idolatry, and asking him to accept him into his tribe. I saw an elderly man wearing a Yemeni cloak standing behind him waiting for him to finish. As the first man would go from one tribe to another, the elderly man would approach the same tribes after him, saying,
O people, this person is telling you to abandon your gods, Al-Lat and Al-Uzza, and he is calling you to abandon the way of your forefathers.
I asked my father, who is this young man and who is the other man? My father said,
This is the young man they claim to be a prophet, and the elderly man is his uncle Abdul Uzza ibn Abdul Muttalib, that is Abu Lahab.
The Prophet would usually visit tribes alongside his confidant Abu Bakr. As well as being his most trusted ally, Abu Bakr was the foremost expert in genealogy, having memorized the history and lineage of a wide variety of tribes throughout Arabia. The Prophet relied heavily on Abu Bakr, demonstrating the permissibility and wisdom in accepting help and utilizing expertise. The Prophet's perfection and infallibility was in religious knowledge and guidance. As for his capacity as a human, he would accept advice and assistance. Before meeting each tribe, Abu Bakr would inform the Prophet of the names of the people he was addressing, the strengths and weaknesses of the tribe, and so on. The Prophet approached many major tribes and was faced with varying degrees of apprehension. Some politely declined, while others replied sarcastically or even aggressively. One of the tribes he approached was Kinda, a historically powerful and imposing kingdom that had fizzled out over time into a modest tribe. One of their chieftains listened to the Prophet and his interest was piqued. He said,
This is a very interesting message. Come with me and I will grant you an audience with the other chieftains.
The Prophet followed him and preached the message to the chieftains. The first chieftain then said,
O my fellow tribesmen, if we were to take this young man from the Quraysh, we will have a message through which we could conquer the other Arabs.
He then turned to the Prophet and said,
If we were to follow this matter of yours, and Allah grants us victory over all your enemies, will you give us control over this affair after you?
The Prophet replied forthrightly, The lands belong to Allah, and He gives it to whomever He pleases. The chieftain then said,
So you are asking us to follow you. Stick our necks out behind you to have them cut off. And after we have spilled our blood and you have used it to conquer the Arabs, you will take the kingdom? Go, for we have no need for this.
Despite the Prophet's desperate situation, he did not compromise. He saw that Kinda were not completely sincere theologically, and were instead politically motivated, so he did not push them any further. The Prophet also met with Banu Shayban ibn Thalaba. Abu Bakr advised,
O Messenger of Allah, the Banu Shayban are of the most noble, illustrious, and intelligent tribes of the Arabs, and they have amongst them so-and-so and so-and-so.
After exchanging pleasantries, the Prophet said, We have come to invite you to the worship of Allah without any intermediaries, and that you reject the false gods. We ask that you accept us into your tribe, as the Quraysh has arrogantly and unjustly prevented us from spreading the word of Allah. The Prophet then ended by venerating Allah and differentiating his needs from Allah's self-sufficiency, and Allah is Al-Ghani, Al-Hamid, the self-sufficient, praiseworthy. They replied,
Do you have anything else?
And the Prophet recited from Surah Al-An'am, Ayah 151.
Say, O Prophet, come, Let me recite to you what your Lord has forbidden to you. Do not associate others with him in worship. Do not fail to honor your parents. Do not kill your children for fear of poverty. We provide for you and for them. Do not come near indecencies openly or secretly. Do not take a life made sacred by Allah, except with legal right. This is what he has commanded you, so perhaps you will understand. Surah 6, verse 151.
They replied,
Do you have anything else?
and the Prophet recited from Surah Al-Nahl, in what was to become one of the most famous admonitions in Islam, recited in most Friday sermons.
Indeed, Allah commands justice, grace, and courtesy to close relatives. He forbids indecency, wickedness, and aggression. He instructs you so, perhaps you will be mindful. Surah 16, verse 90.
The chieftain finally replied,
You have indeed come with goodness. You have come with the best of manners and morals.
proving that the Quraysh went out of their way to approach tribes and slander the Prophet. They added,
And the Quraysh has lied against you.
he continued.
I refer you to our elder, Hani ibn Qais.
Hani then stood up and said,
I have heard what you have said, O member of the Quraysh. I feel that if we leave our religion and our way for your religion and way after one meeting, it may be a hasty decision. That would cause us harm in the long term. We also have people we left behind, that is, who did not come for Hajj, whose advice we have not sought, and whose support is necessary. I therefore think that we should wait, and you should wait, and we shall return, and you shall return. That is, next Hajj. I also asked the advice of our military leader, Al-Muthanna ibn Haritha.
Al-Muthanna then stood up and said,
What our elder Hani said is true. We will not make any hasty decisions. There is also another matter. We are a group of Arabs who have loyalties and treaties with two groups of people, our neighboring Arab tribes and Kisra, Khosrow, king of the Sassanid Empire. As for the Arabs, we do not fear or worry about them, but as for Kisra, we have an agreement to be neutral in all affairs of the Arabian Peninsula, and this matter of yours does not seem to be something that kings approve. If we were to accept your proposal, it would only be on the Arab side.
The Prophet once again remained firm on his principles and responded, Your response has been good and is sincere, but Allah's religion will only be helped by those who embrace it wholeheartedly. Indeed, the Quran states,
O believers, enter into Islam wholeheartedly. Surah 2, verse 208.
As previously discussed, even the Quraysh had offered to accept Islam on the condition that they alternate between Islam and paganism, and Allah responded,
Say, O you disbelievers, I do not worship what you worship, nor do you worship what I worship. I will never worship what you worship, nor will you ever worship what I worship. You have your way, and I have my way. Surah 109, verses 1 to 6.
As the Prophet was exiting the tent, he turned back to the chieftains and said, And what if I were to tell you that Allah would grant you victory over Kisra's kingdom, and you will enjoy their land, money, and captives? Would you then accept? A younger tribesman replied elatedly,
Yes, of course.
but they did not believe that this would ever happen. The Persian Sassanid Empire was so colossal that the Roman Empire failed to conquer it despite hundreds of attempts and battles. No one could ever predict that the meager tribes of Arabia would slay the Goliath. Nevertheless, the Prophet had unwavering certitude in his belief, yaqeen, and the Persian Empire was brought to its knees after a few short years of Islamic conquest. The Banu Shayban did eventually accept Islam after Mecca was conquered, but because they did not formally adopt the Prophet, they missed out on the reward, status, and honor of being titled Al-Ansar, the Prophet's helpers.